Hello everybody. So this video is called Massive Wipeout Event, but MSTR is fine because I have to address the wipeout event that happened in the crypto space in general, and especially with Bitcoin. It's trending on X, bunch of special live streams. People are screaming about losing their lifetime savings because $19.5 billion of leverage longs got liquidated yesterday. And that's 7 to 8 times, depending on what you look, that's 7 times or 8 times as much as FTX. So it's tremendous, the amount of money that was lost yesterday. Bitcoin is broken for the time being. It needs to find a new base of buyers and investors because we got all of this money out of the system. The money was flushed out of the system. So we'll see how long it takes for Bitcoin to recover back to all-time highs. The point is Bitcoin went from 122,000 to 104,900 in just hours. And Kobesi letter right here kind of highlights the whole thing. And that was, of course, two Trump tweets that was an opportunity to sell, right? Triggered the opportunity to sell, and then massive liquidations, and then capitulation towards, right after market close, right after a lot of people, were not on their desks, not with their brokers open, etc., etc., etc. At the end of the day, typically after market hours, and we see these big moves in crypto always when TradFi is asleep and not open. Anyways, what was the issue? The issue was that 104,000 was the bottom on CoinMarketCap here, but on some brokers apparently the 100K was at the bottom. So there was perhaps an issue with oracles and who broadcast these prices, and a lot of the brokers, a lot of the decentralized exchange, a lot of the exchanges were incentivized to broadcast sometimes a price as low as 100,000, which means that he had even more people liquidated because sometimes the price was broadcasted as low as 100,000, which, if you had a 5x leverage and it moves from 122 to 100 and you have a 5x leverage, you may think it's safe, but it's not, because you get liquidated because it dropped, $20,000 in a few hours. And even though that was not the true price, it was the true price for a second or two, and it was enough for them to liquidate you. So that's kind of what happened. Pretty mad, right? Big madness. Let's talk about strategy. And this is where it gets fascinating to me, is that strategy actually behaved much better than Bitcoin. And you're not going to hear about this in the comment section because you only hear when strategy behaves worse than Bitcoin, not when it behaves better. It actually behaved better. We moved from 320 to 290, 320 to 290, the lowest point of the day, and that was after hours, so low volume, keep that in mind. We dropped, minus 9.8%, so minus 10% in a day. I don't claim it's good. It's a very bad performance. I mean, it's awful. Sure, I'm the first one to say, and I can't wait for MSTR to break 400 again. Like, yeah, we all agree on that. What I'm trying to say here is that Bitcoin did worse. Bitcoin dropped from 122 to 1049. So Bitcoin was minus 14.1% intraday, while MSTR was minus 9.8% intraday. And if you happen to not be on TradFi rails, if you happen to be on a decentralized exchange which had a bad, quote-unquote, bad oracle, you may have experienced 122 to 100K. So that would be minus 18% in a day. And keep in mind, these bad oracles, of course, they can work both ways, because some people were able to scalp. They were able to acquire crypto at very, very low prices, having limit orders super low. Some people were able to really get crypto on the cheap. So sometimes having a bad oracle can work in your favor too. But this is the whole issue of crypto still being the Wild West, and the prices that are broadcast for Bitcoin are not uniform across all platforms, but they tend to be much better and much smoother over the TradFi platforms. And so MSTR only experienced the minus 9.8%. That was actually pretty good. So let's talk a little bit about leverage. Let's go over some of my leverage thoughts right now. So first of all, try not to do it. Don't do it, right? That's the basic advice. Go long, buy spot, try to do it as much as possible. Try not to do it. But, like some people have the itch to trade. I have the itch to trade. I've been trying to be better. I have the itch to add to my positions here and there to tweak. Some people have an itch to do leverage. It's just something that some people always want to do. So if you really must do it, which, try to not do it. Don't do it as much as possible. Don't do it, period. But if you really must do it, because we have to keep in mind that, as Charlie Munger would say, leverage sometimes is something, men can't help themselves but to do a little leverage. So if you really, really must, which don't do it, but if you really must, here are some ground rules, right? So sad face if you must do it. But first of all, doing it on a regulated TradFi exchange nowadays, I believe, is still better than doing it on a DEX platform or pair platform, which is unregulated. Doing it on regulated TradFi, still pretty darn risky, but the regulation still deals with issues of like not having a bad oracle broadcast a bad price and you being liquidated. So that's point number one. Regulated TradFi, I believe, for the time being, is still a little better. Then, if you must do it, let's say with margin, really, really 10% of the margin really is the max. I mean, because, remember what we had in April of this year, right? That's, I mean, back in the day, I would have had to tell you about Black Monday of 1988, but we had worse in April 2025 than Black Monday of 1988. So what if April 2025 were to happen again, right? You would be very happy to only have 10% of your margin max. So that's point number two. If you really must do it, do it when there's a crash. Like Liberation Day, April 4, was it? April 4, 2025? That would have been a good time to draw 10% on margin. Do it after a crash. Don't do it at the top. If you must do it, a low volatility asset is typically much better, and this is where Stretch is very impressive. The stock has not moved 5% volatility on Stretch. It's been pretty much trading at 99 or 98.80, and it's been pretty much trading there for a month. So 5% volatility on Stretch. We are pretty near to a stable coin. So do it on a low volatility asset if you must do it. And sure enough, that's the rate arbitrage that a lot of people are trying to play with Stretch. And a safer way to do it, which I've emphasized before on this channel, is to use non-mark-to-market debt. So a good example of non-mark-to-market debt is real estate, for example. If your home value drops 50%, your loan is not going to be due. Your mortgage is not going to be due, even if your loan value drops 50%. So if you must borrow money, try to borrow on something else than whatever you're buying. So try to borrow either on a non-mark-to-market debt, which means the lender is not going to assess the value of what they lend you money against, or try to do it against cash flow, against real estate. But if you do it against an asset that is rated, that is evaluated, that is appraised by the people lending you the money, that's when you get into trouble, because they have an incentive to broadcast a bad price and to just take the asset away. So that's kind of a safer way to do it. But again, in quotation mark, the rule number one is try to not do it as much as possible. That's the rule number one. And of course, how does MSTR do leverage? Well, contrary to popular belief that I still see on CNBC and that I still see from, anger-filled commenters, which may or may not be real, anger-based comments that you see on X from accounts that may or may not be real. Strategy does very, very little leverage. In fact, this is their debt right here, $8.2 billion of debt. And they have $72 billion of Bitcoin. So you see when I tell you 10% max, yeah, they're a little higher than that, but barely. And this is because if you believe in Bitcoin and if you view Bitcoin as a much, much more expensive asset down the road, you know that this debt will equitize. This debt will be paid off by printing new MSTR shares. So the only moment where this debt is not paid off by printing MSTR shares is if the price of MSTR is below the strike price of these convertible bonds. But and by the way, many of these convertible bonds can already be converted, right? Conversion price, for example, for 2028 is 183. For the 2030 is 149, right? 232, 204. So many of them can already equitize, but they will equitize down the road, right? They will equitize, in between 2028 and 2032. So this debt is long-range debt. And contrary to popular belief, it's mostly an ATM story. MSTR has mostly been an ATM story, and that debt, that little amount of debt, will equitize. And what about the perpetual preferred debt, you may ask? Well, perpetual debt has the advantage of never coming due. It's only the interest that is due. Perpetual debt never comes due. So MSTR has kind of built a bulletproof balance sheet, which does not depend on leverage, does not depend on borrowed money, because the convertible debt will most likely convert. If it doesn't convert, is due down the road a long time from now, and the perpetual debt never comes due. So how MSTR built leverage is very special, and they built leverage in a way that a retail trader or retail investor cannot build leverage like this. And that's why we love this stock so much, because they can build leverage for us in a way that is not possible for the average person to do, because they are a large corporation with a shelf registration and an ATM, with an ability to issue preferred debt, with an ability to issue debt, with an operating business, with an ability to be in an exchange. This is things that a lot of retail traders, this is things that most people can't do, but they can. And this is why this stock has worked so well for the past 5 years, and in my view will continue to work very well, even though we are in a little bit of a valley of despair on the stock right now. So anyways, this was not financial advice, not investment advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.